Good afternoon and welcome to Healing X Outreach, a program where we try to expose cults and aberrant counterfeit Christian groups and movements, and also give a voice and an outlet for those who have come out of these groups to share their story and enlighten and enrich us all. I am really excited about today's program. We have two gentlemen joining us today. One is Brother Marcus, who was formerly a member of what was called the Hebrew Israelite Movement, also known as the Black Hebrew Israelite Movement. And joining us also is So Real. He is a Christian apologist who debates Hebrew Israelites and tries to reach out to them as well. I want to welcome both gentlemen on to the program today. Marcus and So Real, are you with me today?
Yes, well, we're definitely here, and it's good to be here. This is my first time at your ministry, and it's just good to have another fruitful opportunity.
Right. Hello, can you hear me?
Thank you for joining us so much. Hello, Brother Marcus.
Hey, yes, this is Brother Marcus. How you doing?
Doing very well. Thanks so much to both of you for coming onto the program today. I know there's so much to talk about when we get to this. We only have 2 hours. We could probably do 3 or 4 weeks on this and not even fully get to the bottom of everything. But I just wanted to go ahead and ask this first question to start out. For those who do not know, what is the Hebrew Israelite movement? Could you kind of sum it up for us?
I'll tell you what. I'll go ahead and go first, and then after that, Marcus can actually definitely do a heck of a better detailed job than I can, because of certain reasons. But yeah, the Hebrew Israelite movement is, and I'm still doing research on this because this is something I have not come out with. The Hebrew Israelite movement is basically a movement of blacks who have been, shipped to the Americas. From all my research, I've always seen that African Americans have yearned for some kind of identity. And this search for identity really did kind of start with, trying to get back to our African roots. One of the, now, like I said, this is part of my research, though, about Zionism. One of the most notable people who is the front face of getting back to these kind of roots things is Marcus Garvey. And so if you look at those times during Zionism and also the time of Marcus Garvey, you'll see that there are actually movements of people trying to get back to something. So during Zionism, you had the Jews trying to get back to their homeland and set up a nation. This is the reason why there's been over 20 plus quote-unquote messiahs that have risen up in the Judaism sect. But of course all of them has fallen, and even one of them actually became a Muslim instead of, finishing out the course. Marcus Garvey, he was kind of inspired by that. He was also inspired by the Irish, how they were trying to do their thing. And so what he wanted to do was he wanted to repatriate Africans back to Africa. He wanted to connect them back to their roots economically and a whole bunch of other ways. And so that actually pretty much kind of inspired, the already set black Jews to doing the same thing. So this kind of nationalistic thing kind of grew from, some influences of Garvey. Before then, you just had, black Jews, blacks who practice Judaism. But once you start to see how, as time goes by, you start to see that they actually became a little bit more nationalistic. Time goes on, their eschaton theology starts to pick up a lot more. I mean, the earlier you go back, you really don't see a lot of black Jews end up being very repatriarchal. I mean, you don't see them kind of repatriating a lot. You really don't. It's later on, and that has a lot to do with the influences of Marcus Garvey, the influences of the Christian identity movement, which was also a breakoff of the British Israelism movement. And both of those movements also carried this kind of same notion. The only difference was they were anti-Semitic. Now, like I said, there's a lot more research I have to go into that, but that's the best I can do to describe the origins of this group and how they grew so radical. I mean, so those are basically the seeds.
So when we're talking
Right.
about Marcus Garvey, who kind of started all this off, what time period are we actually talking about? When did Marcus Garvey come on the scene?
Well, once again, I wouldn't say. Well, you know what, Marcus, he also wanted to say what the Black Hebrew Israelite movement is, and like I said, his words a lot more heavier than mine. So, Marcus, did you want to say who the Black Hebrew Israelites were, bro?
Yeah. I mean, for the most part, I think that you were definitely on the right track. The way I see it when I look at it now, it's really like, it's a quote unquote national movement, basically like almost like a response or retaliation to the social political conditions that African Americans and also Hispanic peoples were and are currently in. And so it's not really a Bible-based, a biblical. I wouldn't even say it's really biblically based. It's really more of, a retaliation to the condition of what, African Americans and Hispanics were and are currently in. So really it's about, identifying yourself as, the Israelites and basically forming a national, basically forming together as a nation to, establish your own government, I guess, and counter America's government and stuff like that. So that's really like what it's mainly about. It's not really based on the Bible at all, So this is why when you start to examine the different groups or cults within the movement, a lot of their teachings aren't even biblical. It's very wishy-washy. It's not grounded or rooted in the scriptures. It's very, it's like an open-ended type of belief system where you have many different views, many different beliefs within that whole paradigm of being an Israelite. So that's basically,
right.
My position on that.
Okay. Yeah, it does seem to be very splintered and fractured. But I guess, so what we're talking about is the idea that those who came across from Africa during the transatlantic slave trade and their descendants today, along with Hispanics, Native Americans, Haitians, Puerto Ricans, even the Polynesian peoples, are all actually the lost tribes of Israel. Is that a correct statement?
Right. That's basically the belief. Right. That's exactly the belief. And what it's doing is, it'll take the conditions of African Americans, Hispanics, anybody who has been wronged by American government, and basically the teaching is that those people who have been wronged by the American government, they are actually the lost tribes of Israel. So that's basically what it is, and when when you establish that type of mentality or that type of when you take that type of stance, what does that do to the minds of the people, who are being oppressed or who's going through, some type of social political situation, within the country? It'll draw those people in very, very easily. And it'll cause like this type of rebellion, this rebellious type of behavior within the society. So that's basically, like an overview when you look at it.
And not only that, just to add to things, when you just go ahead and just take a look at Christianity at face value, anybody that's looking at the emphasis that each of these movements put on things, it's totally radically different. That is the reason why it stands out. If they put the same emphasis that, Christianity has put on things for 1,500 years, then you would not have this cult movement. So what you have there is you have Christians putting an emphasis on being a part of the church, and you have Hebrew Israelites putting an emphasis on being a part of the nation of Israel. That's the difference. And you have to see what the New Testament puts an emphasis on. And so that's what bears out. And not only that, you have to see what the early church fathers put an emphasis on, and so on and so forth. You had people putting an emphasis on, I guess, salvation, because that's what Christians put an emphasis on.
On Christ.
When it comes to the Hebrew Israelites, they do not put an emphasis on Christ. They put an emphasis on keeping the laws. That is what they put their emphasis on.
Right.
When they talk about practice, Christians, they put their practice on good works, loving your neighbor as yourself, right? Feeding the hungry, right? Being there for other people, sharing your life with others, bearing one another's burdens, helping people, things like that, all kind of things. Peace Corps, you name it. When it comes to the emphasis of the Hebrew Israelites, that is not their emphasis. Their emphasis is the feast days, the dietary laws, the new moons, the Sabbaths, and that's what they put their emphasis on in terms of how they practice. But what does the New Testament put the emphasis on? Everywhere that you look in the New Testament, I don't care where you read, you will see good works mentioned everywhere. You'll see Jesus in Matthew 25 talking about good works being actually named as the reason why you get into heaven or not. Before he says you get into heaven or hell, he tells you, hey, you did this to those people, therefore you did this to me, right? When I was hungry, I fed you. Go to Paul. He said, you know what? Why do you persecute me? What do you mean? Oh, you see those people, those churches over there? You persecuted them. Oh, you did that to me, right? That's the emphasis of what it is that God is looking for. And so when you look at the New Testament, it doesn't show very much emphasis on keeping the feast days and the laws and this and that. It doesn't show that, but it always shows who it's pointing to, because those laws were symbolic, But I could go on more, but I'm trying to just pace where you're at, just to answer your question.
Okay. So what I have noticed in my research is that there is not as much of an emphasis on the New Testament, like you were speaking about earlier. There's much more emphasis on the Old Testament and, as they say, keeping the laws, statutes, and commandments of the Most High. But I wanted to talk a little bit more about how they establish their identity. And I was wondering if we could talk a little bit about Deuteronomy chapter 28.
Yeah, Marcus, you can take it away.
Awesome. Right. Okay. So basically, yeah, as far as how these people establish their ethnic identity, because they literally believe that their ancestors are the biblical prophets, like Moses, Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, all the Samuel, Solomon. They believe that they literally descend from those people in the Bible. So the main thing that they'll use is Deuteronomy chapter 28 to establish that idea that they are the Israelites. They'll say, basically, when you read, from verses 1 to 14, you read about all of the blessings that God was going to, pour out upon the Israelites if they kept His covenant. However, if they disobeyed His covenant, from verses 15 through 68, we read about the curses that would, befall the nation of Israel as a punishment, for not fulfilling the covenant. And so they focus on the curses, and they'll say, if all of those curses happened to a specific people, then we can figure out we can basically deduce that those people are the Israelites. If you can find somebody who's been enslaved, somebody whose towns have been besieged, somebody who's been, traded as slaves and stuff like that, then basically we can conclude that those people would be the actual physical descendants of the Israelites. So, they'll appeal to the horrific history of early America, what happened to the African Americans when, we were brought to America as slaves. And they'll also appeal to the history of the early Native American people when, they were also transported as slaves into, various parts of Europe. and they'll say, see, so now we have a people who have, been enslaved, and they'll basically apply all of those curses of Deuteronomy chapter 28 to those people and say that they are the real people. That's basically the basis, the foundation of, identifying as an Israelite.
Right.
Right. And so
yes,
go ahead.
Go ahead.
Well, okay, I was to add to that, I was also just going to say, but just to cover it up, once again, we have to look at, okay, if their searching is for identity, then we have to show what the New Testament says about who we are. And once again, Jesus did not point to the curses. He said, listen, the world will know that you are my disciples. By what? The curses that you go under? The laws that you keep? Nope. He said by the love that you have for one another. This is very simple stuff. He said, look, if you want to be my disciple, you have to what? Deny yourself. Now, I'm not the smartest man in the world, but I think that would include your national identity and who you are as a Israelite and this and that. No, he said, deny yourself, take up your cross, and follow me. So it shows that Jesus really doesn't care about a lot of nationalistic emphasis, does he? Because otherwise he would not have said something so radical. So just a bunch of stuff. Not only that, but there was a story where Jesus told how there was this tree, this good fruit, bad fruit, and it said that Jesus actually cursed the tree. And after that, he said, chop it down and throw it into the fire. And so if they're looking to be cursed, the new covenant does not show that. It shows that we have been redeemed from the curse of the law. And so if they're trying to identify themselves by an old covenant, Deuteronomy 28 curses, then it almost begs the question, are they really Christians? Because Christians have been redeemed by the curse of the law. How? Because, they're under the new covenant. And I don't know how much more clear those things can get when Jesus says that you cannot put new wine into old wine skins. Like you can't do that. The New Testament was to make all things new. And so this whole thing of identity is very misguided just with the plain reading of what the New Testament emphasizes as your identity. It says that we are the bride of Christ. That's what he calls his followers. That's what he calls the church. That's his bride. He doesn't call them a nation of Israelites. No, he says, no, all of you guys, Jews and Gentiles together, you guys are my bride. So there's no Israel. There's nothing like that. So once again, those are things that the New Testament emphasizes in terms of individual and group identity.
And I've seen the 12 tribes chart where they break down, who fits into which tribe based off of their interpretations of Deuteronomy 28. And it seems to me, and I hate to say it this way, but honestly, it seems like it's based off of ethnic stereotypes of who fits the curses. Would you say that was accurate or inaccurate?
What do you mean by like the ethnic stereotypes?
Genesis 49.
So, okay, right, exactly, 100% correct. That's another scripture that they use in conjunction with Deuteronomy chapter 28. They will use Genesis chapter 49 to basically differentiate the peoples and figure out which tribe you come from. So, like they'll break down, maybe I should just get an example. I don't know if you want me to get an example, but okay, like a quick
sure,
example,
yeah, if you want to.
Okay, all right. Let me actually get Deuteronomy. I'm sorry. I'm going to read this scripture to you, Genesis chapter 49, and I'm going to basically explain it exactly how they explained it, Let's start with the American blacks, right? According to the 12 tribes chart, the American blacks would be descendants of the basically of the tribe of Judah. And they'll break this down by saying, they'll read Genesis chapter 49, verse 9, which says, Judah is a lion's whelp. From the prey, my son, thou art gone up. He stooped down, he couched as a lion, and as an old lion, who shall rouse him up? The scepter shall not depart from Judah, nor a lawgiver from between his feet, until Shiloh come, and unto him shall the gathering of the people be. So they'll say, see, so unto Judah, the gathering of the Israelites is going to be. So they'll say, then they'll start quoting, some mysterious history of the beginning stages of the Israelite movement. They'll say, what brother, who were the first people to come out in the streets and teach that, the blacks and Hispanics are the Israelites? It was Negroes. So that's how we know that they're from the tribe of Judah, because Negroes were the first ones to gather the tribes. Like, that's literally how they'll break it down. And so, they'll use scriptures like this. I'm sorry, let me actually read verse 8, because I didn't read verse 8. They'll read verse 8,
Sure.
And it says, Judah, thou art he whom thy brethren shall praise. Thy hand shall be in the neck of thine enemies. Thy father's children shall bow down before thee. And they'll say, how was the Negro's hands in the neck of his enemies? And they say that the enemies here is, speaking of the European people. And they'll say, how was their hands in the neck of their enemies? And they'll say, because the neck is at the top of the body, and so that alludes to North America. Like, that's literally what they'll say. And they'll say that their hands were in North America during the Civil Rights Movement. So that's literally how they break down, that basically the American blacks are from the tribe of Judah. And I sound very embarrassed to actually even, explain that to you, because it's so absurd. But that's literally how they break this down. And, we have thousands of people subscribing to these types of teachings, and it makes absolutely no sense. But that's literally how they break down the tribe.
Wow. And so who do they see Shiloh as being? Do they not understand that to be Christ as Christians would?
Right. Well, see, that's a great question. Now, they'll say, this is how they do things, right? When they look at certain prophecies, which, we know that this prophecy applies to Christ, but they'll go and say, well, prophecies can happen twofold, it'll happen literally, and then it'll happen, future, in the future, speaking of something else. So they'll say that, this scripture was basically, yes, it does apply to Christ, but it also applies to the American blacks. That's basically how they'll, slither around that.
You know what? Just to add to it, when you start to look at the Targums, especially the four Targums, the Targum of Jerusalem, Targum of Jonathan, Targum of, there's two other Targums, Targum of, I think, Palestine. There are four Targums, and the Targums were Aramaic versions of the Old Testament, and they were written in the first century. And it's funny that when you read those first century Targums, they place Shiloh as a person. They call him the king.
Right.
You can't have a group or mass of people, of Israelites, be a single king. It doesn't work. So it shows that from the first century onwards, any notion that, this Shiloh or this Messiah was an entire nation, it was non-existent during the times and day of Jesus. So that means that from the apostles onward, that's what they had taught. And so this notion that, these are, this is a whole group of people, that came much later, because what is new is often nothing really true. It's the things that are true that's really not new, because it's always been the truth. But yeah, that's what they do. It's equivalent to horoscopes. You look at this reading, then you go ahead and try to look at some people and say, oh, hey, that looks like a match. Like, that doesn't work. No one's ever taken Genesis 49 and done that. No one. You know.
Right, and let me actually, I'm gonna give another example too. Let's look at verse 14 in Genesis chapter 49. This is for they break down that they say that the tribe of Issachar are the Mexicans, the Aztec Indians and stuff. So they'll say Genesis chapter 49 verse 14. It says Issachar is a strong ass couching down between two burdens. And he saw that rest was good, and the land that it was pleasant, and bowed his shoulder to bear, and became a servant unto tribute. So they'll say in verse 14, they'll say the strong ass is alluding to the donkey, and they'll say that the donkey is one of the symbols. They'll say that the donkey is one of the symbols of the Mexicans, and they'll say it says
because they're hardworking.
Right, because they're hardworking. And then they'll say, couching down between two burdens, they'll say the two burdens is alluding to North America and South America. And they'll say Mexico, is in between North America and South America. And then they'll go to verse 15 and it says, and he saw that rest was good, and the land that it was pleasant, and bowed his shoulder to bear, and became a servant unto tribute. And they'll say, they'll basically say when the early English settlers came, to the Americas and stuff, they'll say that basically this verse is saying how the Mexicans would work for the Europeans and become servants unto tribute for them. So that's how they break this down, and that's, if you was to approach any of them on the street, let me also say this: if you was to approach any of them on the street and ask them to break down these tribes, did you know that a lot of them really can't do it? They don't have the confidence to actually break this stuff down, and to explain it like that to the public. They'll do it, on a recording, while they're, at their school or whatnot, and they'll put out a video on YouTube. But if you actually put them on the spot and ask them these kind of questions, they don't even really know how to answer them. They just believe in it. So, that's another example of how they, identify themselves as the Israelites. They'll use Deuteronomy 28 to come up with basically a generalized view of who the Israelites are, but then they'll use Genesis chapter 49 to actually separate the people into different tribes. So,
right,
that's how they do it.
And just a note for our listeners out there, you don't just have to take our word for it. You can go on YouTube, you can search this stuff. The one thing that I will say about them is they are very, very prolific about posting YouTube videos. I mean, they are all over the place, and they do them several times a week. Some of them do. So you can actually search out this stuff and hear it straight from the horse's mouth, so to speak. And so we were talking earlier, though, they are very splintered and fractured. There's several different groups or camps, as they call themselves. Would you mind going into a little bit about these different camps, what you know about these different camps, and their backgrounds and differences?
Marcus, you're once again, man, you're on a roll, so you can go ahead, and I'll just kind of follow up with some extra things.
All right. So no one really knows the true beginning of when the actual movement started. The movement actually, it started, you can kind of find different, resources that'll tell you that it started back in, the early 1900s. And then some sources will explain that it started in the late 1900s. So it's really no true historical documentation as, to where this thing or when it actually began. But what I will say is that the group that I came out of is a very it's a group that descended out of a school known, I call them One West. That was like the address or whatnot to the school. I forgot what the actual name was of the group. I think it was I want to say it was the Commandment Keepers, but I could be wrong. I think it was the Israeli school. I'm sorry, I'm hearing some noise in the background. It was like, I think it's called the Israeli School of Practical Knowledge or something like that. But
Would that also be what's called now the Israeli School of Universal Practical Knowledge, ISUPK?
Well, they're not the original school. They brought back the name. This was a different. Right, they brought back the name and basically claimed that they are the original, UPK, the original school, One West School. However, technically they're not, but they brought back that name and they use it as their own. But the group that I came out of is a group known as Israel United in Christ, IUIC, and Israel United in Christ, the leader, he actually came out of the House of David, which was a splinter group from One West. So a lot of these groups, like when you go on YouTube and you look at these Israelite videos, they actually all come from One West. That was like the school that all of their quote unquote elders and leaders, that they all used to attend. They all used to attend One West until it broke apart, and then you have different camps that formulated from that. And then you have other camps that splinter from those other camps, So basically, it's like a big, like a big family tree in a sense of different camps splintering off from one another.
So, and what is the? Yeah, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Yeah, and just to give you one example of how these things kind of split off. Like I said, the earlier that you go back to Black Judaism, when you look at just the African-American Jews, you will not find the kind of radicalness you find in Israelites today. So the one that I always end up calling up the reference is Rabbi Matthew. And Rabbi Matthew was just a regular African-American Jew who had his own congregation, and he pretty much just taught Judaism traditionally. Maybe there were some differences a little bit, but overall, that's what he had pretty much taught. It got to the point where he actually tried to unite with some of the, other Jews from New York, who were not African Americans. And eventually they rejected him. And so he continued to just simply teach what he taught. But there was one student that he had that really didn't like that. And, his name was Abba Bivens. And Abba Bivens had basically, I guess, he was influenced by a lot of things. And I could guess in that era he was probably influenced by Garvey and a lot of other nationalistic movements that were going around, especially since the Christian identity movement took off in the 1930s. They're very nationalistic, racial as well. He was probably influenced by a lot of that stuff because when you look at, the things that he started to tout, it was totally radically different from Rabbi Matthew. So he broke off from, Rabbi Matthew's school, his synagogue, and he basically started his own kind of Hebrew Israelite the camp or denomination, whatever you want to call it. He ran it out of his apartment at first, and he had 3 people who were under him. I believe it was Ariyah, Masha, and I believe it was Shar, but I could be wrong about the third one. Sometimes their names are really hard to remember. Long story short, he was actually killed by some not 5%ers, but some Nation of Islam people because he always ended up saying some very bad, nasty things about anyone who wasn't a black Jew. And so I guess they didn't like that. So they beat him up so bad that he ended up in the hospital and he died in the hospital. And so therefore his little movement of whatever he started rested in the hands of his 3 proteges, Ariyah, Mash, and I believe Shar. And yeah, so from there, if you go and research them, Yaquab. And so, like I said, those guys had their own interesting views. Some, ended up teaching reincarnation during those times. This is still the 1970s. And mind you, the New Age movement officially started in 1973. Once you start to just kind of look at the influences around them, it's a little obvious as everyone is kind of, drawing from the theologies of those days. Now, of course, I don't think a lot of Israelites push that today. Some still do. But that's the reason why you have this notion of the 12 tribes chart, which was started by REI. From there, they started a lot of other odd things. I could name a few of them, but just to save time, we'll just leave the 12 tribes chart and the reincarnation doctrine, that they've come back as St. Paul or Masha is King David, and the congregations believe this. The most radical one was, the Comforter, Jermaine Grant, a.k.a. the Comforter. He had said that he was the Comforter, the Holy Ghost.
Holy Spirit, right?
Yeah.
Right.
So this is the reason why. Yeah. So this is the reason why, after the 1960s, you had all these radical doctrines, and all of a sudden it took this huge turn. Like, that's a pivotal era, the 1960s. Look it up. Look up Abba Bivens, and you'll start to see that's what the One West camps were. But yeah.
Now, when we're talking One West, we're talking Harlem, New York, correct?
Yes.
Right.
Okay. And so Area especially is very significant because of some of the teachings that he came up with. I believe, if I'm not mistaken, he is actually the one who came up with the 12 tribes chart. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And he also came up with a language. Would you mind explaining a little bit about that?
Yes. I would. Yeah. I mean, the language is commonly called amongst the Hebrew Israelite community as the Lashawan Quadash. Lashawan would be their way of saying in the Hebrew language, or tongue, and then Quadash is their way of saying holy, in Hebrew. So Lashawan Quadash would mean, the holy language or the holy tongue. And they basically believe that, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just going to mention that's actually taken from, is Malachi, correct? Where it says that they will speak in a holy tongue?
That's plausible. I've never heard, honestly, I've never heard anyone quote a scripture to show holy tongue. They don't really even use a scripture to back up the reason why they call it the Lashawan Kodash. Well, they will use like Zephaniah chapter 3 and verse 8 and 9 when it speaks of the pure tongue. It speaks of the pure tongue in the KJV.
Pure tongue. Yes. Sorry.
Right. So they'll use that scripture to kind of back up their this whole ideal of the Lashawan Kodash. But basically, they believe that the early Hebrew dialect had no vowels in it or anything like that. The only type of vowels it would have had was the ah sound and the I sound. They don't believe that it had the E or the U or any of that. So a lot of times, when you look at their names, like Arya, Araya, or you'll see Yaquab. It's not Yacob or Jacob or anything like that. It's Yaquab. Or like if you look at all of their names, you're gonna realize that their names, that they all have that ah or that I type of vowel sounds in their names, because they claim that they're going back to the original Hebrew before it was tampered with, quote unquote, and stuff like that. So that's their whole doctrine of that. And they believe also, if you call upon God's names, God's name Yahweh, if you say it the proper way in the Hebrew, you have some groups who actually believe that when you say that, there's power in that. You can cast out demons and stuff like that. You can you have power when you express His name, His true name. So right. some groups actually believe that stuff. So yeah.
Yeah, so we did a program a few years ago, I believe it was 2011, where we talked about the Hebrew Roots movement, and part of that was the sacred namers. people who believed that you had to pronounce God's name in a specific way in order to truly be, truly be saved, to truly be calling on God. Yeah. And actually, this is kind of where my background and yours converge just a little bit, because Jehovah's Witnesses are very similar in that they believe that Jehovah is the true name of God and that you have to use that name if you're going to be saved.
Right, and even these guys, they'll even go as far as like they'll use the KJV and they'll in one mouth, and in one breath they'll say it's the inerrant word of God. They believe that basically the KJV, they believe King James was a black man, an Israelite, and they believe that God inspired him to basically have the Hebrew and Greek translations of the Bible written in English. And so they believe that, the KJV that they're reading is, on one end they'll believe that it's, perfect. It's the perfect word of God or whatnot. But then whenever they read it, they would replace words like God, Lord, or Jesus with different words. Like instead of saying God, they'll say Yahweh, or they'll say the Most High. Instead of saying Jesus, they'll say Yahweh Shai, and stuff like that. So they'll replace, the words and the names in the Bible to kind of appeal, to their Lashawan Kodash doctrine.
Mm-hmm. And there's a little bit of infighting amongst the camps because they have slight differences in how they pronounce those names. Is that correct? Like I saw one where somebody was commenting on a debate between a Christian and a Hebrew Israelite, and he said that the reason the Hebrew Israelite lost the debate was because he didn't come in the right name.
Right, exactly. You have different groups. They have different ideals on what the name is. Like again, some will say that the name Jehovah is supposed to be pronounced Yahweh. Some then will say no, it's supposed to be pronounced Yahweh. Some will say no, it's supposed to be pronounced Yahuwah. And then you got some people that will say no, it's Yod-Heh-Wav-Heh. And then you have another group, they'll say no, it's Ahaya. So it's different names that they think it is. And these camps, they actually go as far as hating one another. They'll hate you for not pronouncing the name correctly. They'll basically disassociate themselves from you. They'll call you names and all types of things. They'll even get into fist fights. There's been a couple of videos out there, showing, extreme altercations, from different groups simply because of how, one person thinks, you're supposed to pronounce it this way. Some people might think it doesn't matter. And, this will raise high tension, between different groups. And, so like I said in the beginning, the commonality here within this movement is the identifying that you're an Israelite. However, everything else goes. You can believe you don't even have to believe in Jesus Christ. You don't even have to believe in the Bible, period. I've met Israelites who said, they would express their disdain towards the book itself. They'll say, that book has been tampered with. We don't need that. God will talk to us, himself and stuff like that. Like they'll express, their disdain towards the book. So, however, they're still accepted, amongst the community. So it's the common thing is just identifying yourself as an Israelite. As long as you do that, everybody in that movement will be cool with you in a sense. They'll still view you as their brother if you at least say that you're an Israelite. However, you don't have to believe in any of their doctrines. You don't have to believe in Christ, any of that. If you just identify yourself as an Israelite, they'll somewhat look at you as their brother, But the moment you question the identity of being an Israelite, they view that as complete apostasy. They'll view that as being a traitor. And almost like, like today, some groups well, one group, the group that I left, they call me the Iscariot brother. You know, after Judas Iscariot, how he betrayed Christ, they'll call me those type of things. Yeah, they'll basically say that I'm a traitor to the nation because I no longer hold their views. You know, so and then there's a lot of groups that will side with you know, IUIC and say, yeah, you know, he's a traitor and X, Y, and Z, because I no longer identify myself as an Israelite.
Will they still speak to you at all, or do they just completely cut you off and refuse to speak to you?
Yeah, they've completely excommunicated me. You know, they don't want to have anything to do with me. They've actually, you know, warned other, you know, people in their group, you know, to not talk to me. You know, so basically, you know, they you know, excommunicated me.
Right. And that again is another convergence between our stories, because similarly, when I left Jehovah's Witnesses, I was labeled as an apostate, and no one, even my parents, aren't even allowed to speak to me now. So it's kind of an interesting how both of those groups use that.
Yeah,
I'm sorry, say that again.
I was going to say, yeah, that's very similar to, you know, what I'm experiencing. I have family members who are still currently in, you know, this Hebrew Israelite movement, and, you know, they have to excommunicate me as well. You know, they can't speak to me and they can't be seen with me, you know, and stuff like that, or else that can cause, you know, problems within their, you know, within the group that they're in and stuff like that. So it's the same thing with, yeah. I'm sorry, go ahead.
So I do want to focus quite a bit on your story here in just a minute, but I just want to get to one thing before that, because we're on a really good topic of, you know, the identity of people, and as long as you identify as a Hebrew Israelite, still kind of look at you. It doesn't matter really what you believe, as long as you have that ethnic identity as a Hebrew Israelite. Is that correct?
Right.
I mean, for the most part.
Right, for the most part. You will have people in the different groups, they will still express hatred towards you, you know, just simply for the fact of you not agreeing with their views on things. However, they will still consider you as a brother, as long as you're identifying yourself as an Israelite, you know.
Okay. So what about people who are not able to be ethnically identified as an Israelite? How are they viewed?
Right. Then from that point, it's just total, you know, racism and prejudiceness. You know, from that point, like for instance, you even have African Americans that identify as Israelites today. They don't even like African people. I'm talking about people who are from the continent of Africa. You know, they hate those people. You know, and even when it comes to, you know, like if you're Japanese, if you're Chinese, if you're European, if you're, you know, Arabian and stuff like that, they do not like anyone who is not a part of that 12 tribes chart. You know, so I mean, you have
like I'm a white dude, so how they view me?
Oh yeah, they definitely, you know, they definitely hate you. They view yeah, that's that would be the number one, you know, on their list of who they hate. They have total hatred and intolerance towards Caucasian people or European people. You know, simply for the fact.
And they even have a specific slur that they use. Is that correct?
Yeah. Well, you know, they'll say, "quote unquote," the white man is the devil. You know, and that's basically their mentality. Period. They don't want to deal with any white person.
So I've heard this also used quite a bit of Esau. They equivocate the white man to be Esau.
Yes, they believe just as how they believe that they are the physical descendants of the Israelites. They believe that the Europeans are the physical descendants of Esau, and the reason why they do this, for the most part, is because they hate Europeans so much they want to see the Europeans destroyed, like exterminated, when I say exterminated, I mean no more white people. Period. You know, and so they'll appeal to this doctrine. Yeah, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
So just like so Esau's descendants became the Edomites, and the Edomites were foretold to be destroyed, and in fact they were. There are no more Edomites around. There is no nation of Edom any longer. Although I mean that's I mean as far as a complete ethnic cleansing, that's not necessarily the case. I believe Iran has quite a few people that would probably be descendants of ancient Edom, but
can I say something about that?
On.
As far as the national,
go ahead.
Yeah.
This is another issue because, like I said, I'm a bit of a historian. Okay, so first off, when you begin to push them and say, okay, well, how do you know that Esau is the white man? They'll always try to trace it to Japheth, but Japheth did not. But Esau did not come from Japheth. He was way back in Genesis 10. You know, and after that, you get up to Genesis 25. You see that they are not from they're not from the line of Japheth, right? Who is Javan? Who are the Greeks? Like they're not from that line. They often say, well, they started to get into that line. No, Esau had Hittite wives. They always showed that the Hittites were blacks. Matter of fact, if you look at the Hittite laws, they're very similar to the Jewish laws. So that's another story. But when you look down during the 1930s, you'll see that there was a man who actually, he broke off from the British Israelism movement, and, he has started to weave in some radical ideas that the British Israelism movement never held. And this was the what they call the two-seed doctrine, okay? During the 1930s, there was a Christian identity movement. That's the movement that started that. And so you had this dude basically weaving together these radical ideas of the two-seed doctrine. He basically was reading a mystical commentary from the 9th century about the story of Genesis. Some Jewish commentator, some Jewish mystic, was basically having his own personal interpretations of Genesis. And what was in there in the 9th century was this dichotomy between Cain and Abel, right? Or also between Jacob and Esau. That's where all that junk actually started from. And so you had the Christian identity movement ended up, having that doctrine long before the Israelites ever got a hold on to it. And not only that, but you also had, I believe it was the gospel of, not Thomas, but it was the gospel of, it was the gospel of Philip that held a very similar view in the 2nd century, but it was refuted by Irenaeus. So again, once you start to just look at, okay, where did this two-seed doctrine come from? What did they believe? The Christian identity people who were basically, what are they called? Ku Klux Klan members, that's basically what they were. They held that doctrine. So again, their doctrine is not biblical. It's more like cult historic, if that makes sense. I could have went into more detail, but like I said, I'm just trying to keep it short. But yeah, do your research on it. Ooh, hello?
Yeah, I'm here.
Where's the host?
I'm not sure.
Well, I'll tell you what, until he gets back, Marcus, did you want to just kind of add on until he gets back in?
Yeah, sorry about that. I had a little bit of technical difficulties. The phone disconnected on me, so I apologize.
It's all good.
Okay, so
yeah.
I did want to ask, what do the Hebrew Israelites do about Deuteronomy 23:7, where it says, "Thou shalt not abhor an Edomite, for he is thy brother"? I mean, have you ever brought that scripture up to them?
Yeah. That's been brought up plenty of times. And what these One West Israelite groups do is they'll say, "Oh, well, that was only for a specific period of time. That's when the Israelites had their own government and they were in their promised land." But they'll say, but because Esau, the Edomites rebelled against Israel and, attacked Israel after Babylon attacked them, that made, the Edomites no longer Israel's brother. And so now, Deuteronomy 23:7 no longer applies to an Israelite anymore. That's their their stance on it. And I find it funny because it's like in one breath they're gonna they push that you have to keep all of the law of Moses, but then when it comes to certain laws like that, they'll have all type of excuses to get out of basically to reason their way out of keeping that law.
But you know what? That actually brings up another question, because we can use that same standard for Jesus Christ. Because when the Jews ended up saying, "Free Barabbas, crucify Jesus, let his blood be on us and our children," well, I guess the Black Hebrew Israelites, by that, should just go ahead and disown the Jews that were in the New Testament. They should just totally disband them and no longer count them as their brethren, and I guess they should just, I don't know, probably even discount each other who may not agree with that position. So, like I said, these kind of standards could be used all over the board, and it's sad, but they'll pick and choose.
Right, because it seems like that's exactly the case. They pick and choose, because I've seen, even though they do not have their own nation or anything else, they still try and act as if the old covenant is still in effect for the most part. A lot of these guys are running around calling themselves high priest or other, Old Testament names, right, things like that.
Right, like the camp that I came out of, IUIC, what they do now is they have this whole ranking system where basically, for the men, when the men come in, they learn, they learn IUIC's doctrine, and after a period of time of being indoctrinated, eventually it becomes like second nature to them, and so they've become, fully indoctrinated, and they now take certain tests, that have different questions on it, asking you what color were the Israelites, what color was Moses, basically is express that they were black. They'll say, what tribe are the Mexicans and stuff like that, and they'll ask you these different questions, and you have to get them right. And when you pass it, you pass the test, and you can rank up. You become a soldier, then you become an officer of 10, then an officer of 20, an officer of 50, and you become a captain. So it's like these Old Testament terminologies that we find like in Exodus when Israel was, delivered out of Egypt, and they had to form sort of like an army. And so Moses, set them up in different positions as soldiers, officers, captains over 50s and 100s and stuff like that. And, we see the similar design, being practiced amongst these camps today. Like you have IUIC, you have Future World of Israel, you have ISUPK, all these different groups, they practice that type of pattern, that type of ranking system.
Let me ask you about another group. There's one called GMS, or Great Millstone. They seem to be probably the most aggressive of all the groups.
Right. I would say they're like the most extreme of the groups.
So
yeah, I really have no information on them.
Okay. I just wondered because we were.
Yeah, they're like the most extreme. Their leader was Tahar, and Tahar he comes from he comes from the house of David. and the House of David was a group that was a part of the Israeli Church of Universal Practical Knowledge, the ICUPK, which I believe was also, is identified as One West. And so, when that split apart, it formed, you had various members like Masha. He formed the House of David, and then you had Gaikwab, Ariyah, and Shar. They formed they formed the church known as the Israelite Church of God in Jesus Christ, I believe, it was something like that. They formulated the same church together. But then out of Masha's group, which is the House of David, that split apart, and you have IUIC, GMS, and you also have another group known as the House of Israel. Those three camps came from the House of David. So Tahar, he's the leader of GMS. And, they basically teach that, they basically teach the same thing, that the blacks and Hispanics are Israelites, but they also believe that you can tell who an Israelite is by their characteristics. Like, basically, this is no joke. It's actually funny, but it's still, like, serious. This is what they seriously believe. Basically, if you know how to dance, like, if you know how to, literally, like, dance, they'll say, oh, he's an Israelite, because basically if you know how to do, great things, then, you're an Israelite. If you know how to play basketball really well, oh, yeah, that person is an Israelite. That's basically what they believe. So they also, believe that you don't have that, they believe that you don't have to keep all of the law of Moses because they believe that you can't do it. But it's like, it's like a collage of many beliefs. They believe all types of radical and extreme things. And you just got to YouTube it, just type in GMS on YouTube.
Right.
You can see their mannerisms and the things that they teach.
So if you don't mind at this time, Brother Marcus, I would like if you could just share with us your story, how you became a part of this movement, what it was like for you, and the process of coming out of it.
Right. All right. I guess I'll just try to keep this condensed because, I can go on for hours, explaining everything. Basically, my mother, she was introduced to this, movement before me and my other brother. And basically, she came into it. I started to see a change in how she dressed herself. She stopped wearing, different articles of clothing like pants, and she started to wear long, dresses. Every time she read the Bible, she always, wrapped her head with a head wrap. And I used to make jokes, and say, "Oh, you're a Muslim now," and she would laugh, and she would just keep her room door, the door to her room open, and like blast the Israelite class that she was in. Eventually, two members of IUIC, they visited, my home, and that's when I got to interact with them. When I got to interact with them, I was basically asking, all kind of questions that I've had about the Bible and about history, and they were giving me answers, sensible answers at the time that I thought was real answers, and they were, I was just baffled and amazed by how they, knew the Bible in a sense, how they were able to go to different verses and stuff. That was something that I never really saw when I was a Christian. I never met someone who knew how to navigate through the Bible so well, as I thought.
Right.
And so hearing, learning from them, I felt like I was getting more than what I was learning in church. And, they always said that what they were teaching me was the truth of the Bible. And so because I was very ignorant and vulnerable, I didn't know the Bible. I wasn't informed of what the Bible was about. I was kind of just like one of those Christians who weren't really, astute or, aware of what they believed in. I was kind of just, going to church and not really studying anything. I basically was, persuaded. and I became an Israelite. And so, I was a part of that movement from that point on forward for 7+ years. And, through those various years, I basically was indoctrinated. I learned all of their teachings, and I moved up into the ranking system. I moved up through the ranks. I became a head officer within IUIC, and I started a school in IUIC. I opened up the Virginia branch in IUIC. So, we got a building, and, we went out and evangelized in the streets and brought people into the congregation, and the school grew. And, I basically taught those individuals and basically counseled them and looked after them and stuff like that. So that was like, my involvement. I also attended many marches and different events, to bring people into the movement. So some of my videos are actually still out on YouTube, which I'm trying to work to get them taken. I don't want to be a part of that. But, yeah, so that's basically everything in a nutshell. Now, the way I ended up getting out of it was there was just a situation that transpired with my brother, who was also in it as well. But I started to notice a lot of mistreatment going on, within the congregation of various members, just very weird things going on. But the main thing that led me to back out was there was a certain doctrine that was being taught in IUIC at the time. I think it's still being taught, I would say. But basically, it was like, if a woman is married to a man and the man commits adultery against his wife, that woman does not have the ability to divorce her husband. She basically has to remain that man's wife, even though he continuously cheats on her. If he, let's say, the husband wanted to, sleep with different, women like prostitutes and stuff like that, and the husband caught an STD, then that woman that's his wife, basically, she's stuck with him and she has to catch the STD with him. And that was the doctrine.
Wow.
And, my brother basically spoke up against that and said, no, that's not right. I'm sorry, go ahead. Somebody was saying something?
Oh, no, go ahead. Go ahead.
Oh, okay. Yeah, so that was the doctrine, and my brother, he spoke up about it, and he, started to ask questions like, where is this coming from in the Bible? What scripture is that? And the leadership didn't like it. And so they basically, humiliated him before all of the congregation. They said he was weak to women and that he wasn't fit to be a leader, and that he didn't understand the roles of, a man and a woman and stuff like that. And so they humiliated him, and eventually, they kicked him out of the group and of the congregation. And what they counseled me was, they said, since he's no longer a part of IUIC, you need to basically, put him out in the streets and just, forget about him. He's done. And so basically when they told me that, I'm like, is that brotherly love? Is that spirit of Christ, how we're supposed to operate with one another? And, that also caused controversy. And it led to basically a situation where they went as far as saying you have to, excommunicate your brother, no talking to him, delete him from everything. And, it got to where it was so ridiculous. They even they pulled up my Facebook, and they saw that I had my brother added as my friend on Facebook. And they basically gave an order and said, you have to remove him from your Facebook, or else. And I said, no, I'm not going to do that. I don't have to remove him from my Facebook. And because I did not comply with that order, they kicked me out. So basically, when I got kicked out of the congregation, I basically kind of sat back and started to do more research on the movement from that point, because, it was playing basically, I thought that what I was in was the right thing. And so I would literally just pray, every day and, ask God, why did this happen, if I'm doing what if I'm doing what you required me to do, why am I going through this type of situation? And so I started to basically review, examine the other groups in the movement. And I started to just realize, how a lot of their teachings was just completely unbiblical. And so that took me down a huge, path of examining what everyone teaches and looking at what the Bible says and seeing if that matches up with the Bible. And I had to put a lot of things in scrutiny, and I basically realized that basically everything that they're teaching is unbiblical. Everything about the movement is just unbiblical, period. And that's basically, when I decided, what, this is not something that I want to identify myself with. I don't want to be a part of this type of movement. It's unbiblical. It's unethical. And, that's when I completely said I'm done with being a part of this movement, because of the toxic behavior and also the toxic doctrine that they teach, the heresies that they teach. It's just not biblical. So that's everything in a nutshell.
Would you say that during your time affiliated with the IUIC that your views on God's favor were personally tied to being a part of the group?
Yes. I thought that, number one, I thought IUIC was the group that God really was, dealing with, because I was mesmerized by, the crisp video edits that they have on YouTube, the garments, the resources that they have. They have a lot of people in there that have good skills, good editing skills. They have, they're very resourceful in putting things together. And so, at the time, I thought that God was really working with them, and because I saw that my opinion was that IUIC was like the head of the movement, and so I thought that this was like something that was being God inspired, and so being a part of a group, I felt like I was in right standing with God. I felt like if I was in good standing with them, if I followed the doctrine, kept the commandments and stuff like that, that I was in right standing with God. Basically, I was in God's favor. And so that's basically the view, the ideal that I had. I thought I was doing everything that was supposed to be the right thing.
Yeah. Wow. There is so much that I think that those are from Jehovah's Witnesses can relate to in that event. And sorry, going back to that, we did want to talk a little bit today about the similarities between the Israelite movement and this, but I think that pretty much sums it up pretty well, of the similarities, especially the way that you view the movement as the truth and how that was, how that movement, being tied to that movement, having God's favor. But I also wanted to ask you another question. I mean, so it's called Israel United in Christ, but what is the view of Christ? And is it a high view but not a sufficient view? Is it a substandard view of Christ? I mean, how is Christ viewed through that movement?
Right. Well, in IUIC, they view Christ as the king of the nation of Israel. And, they basically believe that, he's a black man. They believe he's black. They believe that he's their leader. However, to keep it really honest with you, as much as they say they believe in Christ, they follow Christ, he's not really taught, amongst IUIC, honestly, because simple teachings like when you read Matthew chapter 5, right, verses 43 through 48, we see verses when Christ said, to love your enemies, to do good unto those who curse you, and pray for those who despitefully use you and stuff like that. But those type of teachings are never expressed amongst IUIC. And when if they are expressed, it's tainted. You know, they'll say, oh, well, the enemy in this verse is not talking about the white man. It's referring to your enemy as, you know, an Israelite brother who becomes your enemy. You know, love him. But as far as the white man and the other nations, you know, you don't have to love them at all. You know, you can hate those people. And so that's basically what it is. You know, so Christ isn't really the focal point. They don't even understand the power of his ministry, of what he did. You know, how he redeemed Israel, how he, you know, basically redeemed mankind. They don't even understand that. You know, they don't really teach that at all. As far as, you know, his death, burial, and resurrection, what was the significance of that? They don't teach that. You know, the only thing that they really teach is.
Do they view themselves as being in the new covenant?
Yes, they believe.
Or do they believe that
they're
still
in the new covenant.
future? Okay.
You know what? That's actually interesting. They believe that they're in the new covenant, but they don't believe that the new covenant has fully, you know, is in full effect yet. They believe that they're in like the beginning stages of the new covenant. They believe that the new covenant is going to be fully fulfilled in the kingdom of heaven. And the reason why they believe that is because they'll read scriptures like Hebrews 8 through 10, which, you know, when you read it, it'll say like, you know, he will put his laws into their heart, and no man shall teach his neighbor, and stuff like that. So they'll say,
know the Lord.
Do we have to teach?
Yeah.
Right. They won't have to teach their neighbor about the Lord or anything. So they'll say, in today's time, don't we still have to teach people about the Lord? And then they'll say, see, so we're not under the new covenant yet. It's not fully in effect. You know, they say that it will be fully in effect in the kingdom of heaven. That's their viewpoint.
And so what is the kingdom to them? I mean, is it some sort of like almost Edenic state where those who are truly Israel are under the kingship of Christ, and they are the ones in charge of the world?
Yes, that's exactly what it is. They believe that basically the kingdom of heaven is going to be on earth forever, and all nations are going to be like slaves. Like if you look at, you know, chattel slavery, like early American slavery, they believe that it's going to be flip-flopped. Like instead of how the Europeans were enslaving blacks, it's going to be blacks enslaving, you know, Europeans, Chinese, Japanese, everybody. And, you know, basically, you know, like, I hate to kind of speak it in this way, but this is how they view it, you know, literally. They believe that in the kingdom of heaven, you know, people are going to be out in their fields picking cotton. They literally say that. They believe that people are going to be, you know, folding their clothes and washing their dishes and stuff like that. And, you know, it's this very twisted type of reality that they think that that's the kingdom of heaven. And basically Christ is going to be the head king in charge, and everyone else is going to be following his orders of, you know, going out to different nations and enslaving them and bringing them into to their kingdom and stuff like that as their subjects. That's basically their view on what the kingdom of heaven is.
Mm-hmm. So what is their view of like heaven and hell, for instance?
Right. So I mean, as far as heaven and hell goes, they don't believe that there's a place called heaven, and they don't believe that there's a place called hell. They believe that those things are conditional type of realities. Like if you are in rulership, if you're a slave master, you're in heaven. But if you're a slave, you're in hell. So that's their understanding of that. They don't even believe, you know, in an actual place known as heaven or a place known as hell. They believe that those things are conditional situations.
So where is God, Jesus, and the angels, according to them?
Right. So they don't go into that. You know, they'll say, oh, he's in the spiritual realm. You know, that's as far as they'll go. They won't say, oh, he's in a place known as heaven. You know, they won't really express that. They'll just say, oh, he's in a spiritual realm, you know?
Mm-hmm.
That's basically
and I take it that their view of Jesus Christ is also would be similar to Jehovah's Witnesses in the fact that they don't actually believe in the deity of Christ.
Right. They don't believe that Christ is God. They believe that Christ was an angel, was a created. They believe Christ was the first angel created by God, and they believe that this first angel was the best, and X, Y, and Z, and now he's been given power to redeem Israel and stuff like that. But they don't believe that he's actually. They don't believe in his deity at all.
Right. So that would be exactly like Jehovah's Witnesses, who believe that Jesus is the Archangel Michael.
That view is actually
interesting.
That view is actually is pretty common amongst the community, the Israelite community. Not everyone believes that, but a lot of them do.
And what is the view of the Holy Spirit? I know there is a person out there claiming to be the Holy Spirit, but as far as the rest, what would their view of the Holy Spirit be?
Right. So it's just many different views. The camp that I came out of, they don't even believe that the Holy Spirit is a person. They believe that the Holy Spirit is basically the understanding or the knowledge of the Bible. So they believe that's literally what they believe. They believe that the Holy Spirit is basically the understanding of God's law. That's what they believe the Holy Spirit is. They don't believe it to be a person of the Godhead or anything like that.
I see.
They think of it as some type of intelligent, some basically intelligence of the Bible. That's basically what they believe that the Holy Spirit is.
So, would this be the power to understand? Would that be the Holy Spirit?
Right. The power to understand God's laws. That's what they believe the Holy Spirit is.
Right. So likewise, Jehovah's Witnesses believe that the Holy Spirit is not a person. They believe that they call it God's active force, or basically the extension of God's power to move, create, open people's eyes, and things like that, resurrect. And so it's kind of like Star Wars.
Oh, man.
So now you still have family that are in the Hebrew Israelite movement, and they have completely cut you off.
Well, I would say yes and no. First, it was complete cutoff, but as time progressed, there's instances when I might come across them, and I'll speak to someone in my family who's a part of it, and we'll have a short conversation, but it's not like it's nothing like how is it? It's like they don't reach out to me. We don't really talk like that. Like they basically disassociate themselves with me. They can't be seen in a public place with me, obviously, or they'll face trouble with their group that they're in. And then it would be the same thing with, my wife and her family. It's the same type of situation too. So,
wow,
yeah.
So real. Would you have anything to add to the conversation we've been having thus far?
Yes, I do have some things to add. I find it interesting that when it comes to the doctrine of there being some other realm instead of heaven and hell, the Mormons have the same doctrine. I've been talking with them, at least once a week, once every other week, because they visit my house, and I allow them to. We've been having some good talks since November, and I'm going to visit. They're going to visit me again this Monday. They speak about this other realm. They don't believe in heaven. They don't believe in hell. They speak about this other realm, and so it's funny that they believe that. It's also funny that the LDS community, when I say, hey, I'm going to go and do some research, they hand me a card and they say, hey, this is our website, and these are some places that you could definitely research. We strongly encourage you to research on those places. We have people standing by 24 hours who will answer all of your questions. Definitely, do your research with us. That's the same thing that they do with their members, the IUIC members. They have podcasts. They have all kinds of things. They have their videos. You only are supposed to research with them. I mean, I've seen apps and all kinds of things for them to buy their own clothes, their own jewelry. I've seen even ads for even Bibles, and even women who want to increase their lactation. I've seen things for that. I've seen all kinds of things. Whatever you need, you get from them. Those are signs of a cult, And then so the whole notion about what else? I believe you guys said the afterlife and slavery. Notice that it goes against scriptures like, and he shall wipe away every tear from their eye, and there shall be no more death, no more pain, no more suffering, no more this. How is that going to be if you have people who are going to be your servants forever? How is that possible? And not only that, once again, it begs the question, since these quote-unquote Edomites are so evil, I thought evil souls go to hell. Well, once again, they don't believe in hell. Oh, that's very convenient. So now we can all place them as slaves forever in the kingdom. There, that fixes that doctrine. And, well, once again, the Bible speaks about hell a lot. You can't just override those scriptures. You have to deal with them. You say that there's a coming new covenant and it's not here yet. Well, what do you do with 2 Corinthians chapter 3, where Paul says, well, hey, we are ministers of the new covenant. Not the coming new covenant, not the soon to be. No, that's what he says. Jesus says the same thing. Just one moment. I got to go get my smoothie here. I'm sorry. Just a second.
Right. But, Surreal is making a great point. And, it's very unfortunate that these are the things that they teach. And, I mean, no one is lying. You can actually view their videos all over YouTube. You can see the things that they teach. And they even have a website that you can visit, and you can see an extension of their teachings and stuff like that. But these are their views, and a lot of these views that they have are persuading hundreds of people, thousands of people out there who were just like me, when I first got introduced to the movement, ignorant. It was, ignorant. That's just what it is, I was ignorant of what Christianity taught, what it was, and because of that, I was vulnerable for heresies. And this is what we see, happening repeatedly throughout this country, and not just this country, but throughout the world. In almost every single country,
and it's
have that movement. Yeah.
And it's not just through the Black Hebrew Israelites. I mean, the same thing could be said for Jehovah's Witnesses, for Mormons, like So Real was talking about.
Correct. Absolutely.
I mean, this is people who are not people who have a belief, but an uninformed belief, and who are not rooted in Christ, exactly, are vulnerable. And the only way to counter this is to, number one, have your faith firmly planted in Jesus Christ. Number two, know what it is you believe and why you believe it.
Right. Exactly. That's exactly, what it is. And so
now that you have left, where are you at now? I mean, obviously you've been demonstrating through the things that you've said that your faith now is firmly in Christ. But what was that process like for you?
Man, that process was it was the worst, because at one point in time, when I first said I'm done with the movement, it was a very tough, it was like a breaking point for me. because I had all of this, this strong belief in the movement. I thought that, I was pleasing God with this, and when I realized it was not, the truth, it kind of put me in question of, questioning God, and I got to a point to where I fell into unbelief. I said, you know what, this was just too much. I can't do this anymore. I started to, I said, you know what, I'm not even going to look at the Bible anymore, because it was just like, I was too confused and just discombobulated. But that, so that lasted for like 2 weeks. And then I just started, getting back into the Word and just starting to read it for myself and study it for myself, And it's like immediately after I started doing that, everything just started opening up. I started to realize that, everything that I was hearing from Christianity was biblical. It was actually what the Bible says, And so I ended up basically, long story short, it's almost like I started over. I had to start over with everything, and I relearned, Christianity. I hate to say Christianity, as if it's like a different, some type of, like a different perspective of the Bible, But I think that is what the Bible is teaching. But I relearned that, and I got rooted, in Christ, and so my understanding of the Bible is, I think, the proper way. I don't think that it's tainted anymore with the Israelites. I had to get all of that stuff, and wash all of that stuff out of my brain, and just kind of, start over and build my faith back up. So that's where I'm at now. The process, was definitely very, very tough for me, because I was by myself. Everyone in my family, kind of turned against me. Everyone that I thought was my family, my close friends and stuff that I had in the movement, they all turned against me. And, I was getting a lot of death threats, a lot of threats and stuff like that. It was really, really tough, man, a really tough journey. I even got to the point at one point in time where it got, suicidal, because it felt like everything that everything that I knew, everything that I thought that I was just a lie, and it felt like everything was against me at that point. So I had to start over with everything, everything. So it was very, very tough, and so this type of I was just going to say this one last thing. And this type of process is not it's not, something uncommon. This is what happens to everyone, who goes through that type of situation, where they'll realize that what they're a part of is not the truth, or is not the right way. They'll go through this same type of psychological, situation where, it's kind of like you hit rock bottom from that point. You lose everything. This happened to a lot of people that I know today who were also Israelites, but they, got out of the movement. They basically had to restart their entire lives, because the movement causes you to, stop going to school. It causes you to quit certain jobs. It causes you to divorce women that you've been married to for 10, 15 years. It causes you to separate, your families, and you go wholeheartedly into these groups just to, get mistreated and then fall out of the group, and then what are you left with? Absolutely nothing. You've destroyed everything,
Well, I just wanted to say, as we're coming into the last 22 minutes of the program, we do like to open up the phone lines for any questions or comments. If you are on the line with us on Blog Talk Radio, you can press 1 and I will unmute you. Or if you're listening via the Six Screens Telenetwork, press *1 to unmute yourself. Do we have anyone that would like to question or comment? no one is pressing 1 at this time. So I just want to, before we go on, I do want to give a quick plug. We were talking about Mormons just a little while ago. Next weekend, next Saturday, we actually have Keith Walker from Evidence Ministries. He's going to be joining us, and we are going to be discussing Mormonism. And so if you are listening today, be sure to tune in next week. We're going to have a great discussion. So, Brother Marcus and So Real, are you still with us, So Real?
Yeah, yes, I'm still here. Yep.
Okay. All right. How can people find you? What resources do you have for listening to debates, or do you have a YouTube channel you'd like to plug?
Sure. Yes, I have a YouTube channel. You can type in SSOREAL. That's So Real, my poet name. I'll also give out my email and my phone number because I deal with people who are having issues with their spouses becoming Israelites. If I were to share with you the emails that I get, it would only raise even more questions. My email is SSOREAL@gmail.com. And also my phone number is 412-863-5173. Please give us a call, or, just give me a call if you want any information that can help you kind of further informationally combat these doctrines, these false doctrines that are coming for your families and your loved ones. This is really no joke. I've done a video called A Presentation for Pastors. And what I did was I showed just a little overall short, brief video presentation on how Black Hebrew Israelite theology is wrong. And I have my email there in the description section. And I've had people who took me up on the offer and said, hey, I saw the video. I'd like that PowerPoint. And I go ahead and give them the PowerPoint so that way they can preach this stuff over their pulpits. We need to multiply our voice so that way we can kind of, keep our young people, especially our young people, away from these cults. And if the pastors don't speak about these things, then that'll be one of the reasons why all of a sudden the young people just mysteriously just start slowly disappearing, But, yeah, that's pretty much my info. And if anyone else has any other questions or things, I'm always open, and I'm praying for you all.
Thank you so much for sharing that. I appreciate it. And as you said, this is becoming a national and even worldwide movement. It's affecting so many of our inner city communities right now, and we do want to spread the word. We do want to get the word out that there are faithful answers to some of the objections that are being brought up and raised, and we want to educate people. And that was specifically why I was so excited to have both of you on today. Brother Marcus, do you have anything you'd like to share?
Yes,
as far as how people can...
Right, as far as...
Yeah, go ahead, I'm sorry.
If anyone wants to contact me, you can reach out to me on Facebook. Just type in Marcus Webb. That will be MarcusWebb. You can add me or send me a message on Facebook, and that will be the way you can communicate with me.
Okay. And have you now? I know that you had done some Google Hangouts with people like I believe his name was G-Man. Is that
right? Mm-hmm.
Are you still doing those, or is that something that's just every once in a while?
Yes, it's kind of like every once in a while, but I definitely do those types of videos with G-Man, Surreal, all of the members of a group that we've kind of, formed together known as the Soldiers of God. We, do a lot of videos. Primarily it's Brother Surreal and the other members, but I also chime in and, we tackle different heretical doctrines that are taught within the Israelite movement to, counter the movement. So that I think that needs to be done on a wider scale from many other Christian groups out there. because, kind of like what you said before, when you go into YouTube, those Israelite videos are all over YouTube. And to be quite honest, one of the things that kind of made me go more along with the Israelite movement was the fact that I didn't see any Christians addressing, the Israelite theology, the Israelite doctrine. And so it kind of made it seem like the Israelites were just running over everything, and, which was not true. But, I feel, I strongly, suggest that, more and more Christian groups, come out and address these doctrinal heresies that are being taught within the Israelite movement, because, that's what people who are vulnerable need. They need answers. And if it's only the Israelites giving answers and explaining things, then, it's going to be, a bad outcome, a bad result.
Sure.
A lot of people, almost, I would say 9 out of 10, if not 10 out of 10 of the people that are in the movement today, do you know how they came into it? It was because of a YouTube video. That's exactly how they came into being an Israelite, because of a YouTube video. It wasn't necessarily because of the interaction on a street corner when they ran into those guys in the streets and stuff like that. It was from a YouTube video. So, that's their strongest weapon, in a sense, using the internet to persuade many.
Yeah. And there, I guess, so the movement kind of flourished under the radar. Nobody was really answering back or giving any biblical responses to things for a while. That's starting not to become the case. I know there has been a documentary out, Debunking Hebrew Israelites, I believe is the title of it. It's about 2 hours long. It's really good. Brother Surreal was saying that he has his. I'm sorry. Could you tell me what the title of that was? For preachers.
Yeah, I believe it was. You're talking about Black Hebrew Israelites Debunked?
Yes, that's it.
Yeah, yes, that was by Keith Truth Thompson. And ironically, Keith Truth Thompson was one of the reasons. Well, he was the main reason why I discovered what apologetics was in the first place. Way back in 2007, when he came out with his film called Zeitgeist Debunked, or Zeitgeist Part 1 Exposed, But you know what? There was a person I was talking to yesterday, and I will keep their name anonymous, but they were talking to me about how, there's somebody, that they're with, and they are unfortunately into the IUIC, but the other person is not. However, this individual that was talking to me yesterday had said that, yes, they will share with me certain files that they have, and one of the things that they're doing is something different. This person said to me that our team is doing a really good job at attacking the doctrine, but this person is not going to do that. This person, they said that because based on their experience, they're going to attack the function and the cult way of how the IUIC is doing things. So I just wanted to show you a little something right here. Right now, this person is reading a book, and I forget what the book is called, but they pointed out something in the book. This person was the person that wrote the book was a former Moonies member, and they started to uncover all the interesting stuff that they would do. They basically put people in 4 categories. They put people in a category of behavior control, thought control, informational control, and believer control. Now, what they said about the believers was, the believers, don't worry about recruiting them. They'll recruit themselves. Yeah, let that sink in for a little bit. Have you ever known anyone who is a truth seeker? And often this is the pattern that I continue to see when I get these calls from people who have their significant others going into these cults. the people, they realized that, their significant others were always seeking and searching. They never realized that they were always doing that. So it starts off with them seeking and searching because they feel like there's something more, there's something missing from whatever the church isn't giving them, which is something I really want to look into so that way this could stop. From there, that's when they find, the IUIC. Oh, you know what? God answered my prayers. I knew it. And what do? The recruiters, they switch to the believers mode. So they got a believers presentation in their head. Oh, yes. Yep, God sent you to us. And it just goes right on from there. The believers, they end up recruiting themselves. Brother Marcus, do you want to talk about that for a little bit?
Man, that's like, I got to see what book that is, man, because that right there was like, that hit right on the head, because like I said earlier of how I got into the movement, my mother, she got into it because she was one of those individuals, those truth seekers. She felt that there were answers that were not, questions that were not being answered, and she wanted to find certain, answers and stuff like that. And so this is how she discovered, IUIC. And that's exactly how this stuff works, man. That's exactly how it works. And, again, I was a leader in it, and I'll be honest with you. The same way you just said, Surreal, it's the same type of thing I would say to someone who, had questions. Like I would say, like for instance, if I was out teaching in the street and someone walked up and began to ask questions, and it seemed like they were being intrigued, I would say, God led you here, because God led you here so that you can hear me, and, express to you the truth and things like that. And that would be, kind of like a fulfilling saying in that person's ear, and it would make them more and more intrigued and want to learn and stuff like that. But these were tactics that I was learning from the men who, persuaded me. So it's kind of like, that's the type of system that goes on. It's not, it's not mapped out like, oh, this is what we're going to do with believers, this is what we do with so-and-so, but it's practice. It's kind of like it kind of goes untalked about, but it's just what happens,
Right.
Those type of things happen.
And actually, I just wanted to interject. So that person that you were talking about there, his name was Steve Hassan, or is Steve Hassan. He's still with us, and he came up with what's called the BITE model. The behavioral, information control, thought control, emotional control, and his book is called Combating Cult Mind Control. He also has another one called Freedom of Mind, and you can get his resources at freedomofmind.org.
Awesome.
Good.
I'm going to do that right now.
Yeah. Matter of fact, I actually have up part of this page, and Brother Marcus, I'm going to read some snippets here, and I want you to comment on them, and they're probably going to raise a few eyebrows. Tell me if some of this stuff does not sound strikingly similar to your experience. Okay? Here's some bullet points. The Moonies do a very thorough job of convincing people that former members are satanic and that even being in their presence could be dangerous. Another point is, It says, it is ironic that whereas Moon's stated goal is to unify the world, many of his strategies foster jealousy and spite among leaders, virtually ensuring a lack of unity. And I guess this is how they kind of keep the ball rolling. You keep the dog chasing the meat in front, and then because if the goal is reached, then all of a sudden the growth stops. You can't have that. Here's one last one, and after that I'll just kind of let you talk again. It said, it was as if we were God's army in the middle of a spiritual war, the only ones who could go to the front lines and fight Satan each day. We're the only ones that really got it together. I mean, did you happen to feel that way when you were in the cult? Any of this stuff kind of?
Yeah, absolutely. That was all three of those are absolutely true. Whenever a member is, whenever even if a member decides to, voluntarily decides to leave, that person is demonized and, ostracized and excommunicated. And basically the orders are, do not deal with that person. Don't talk to them. Don't call them. Don't do anything, or else their sin is going to rub off on you somehow. Whatever those demonic spirits that they had, they will rub off on you, and basically, they can cause you to leave the group. Then it was a second.
Could I just jump in real quick?
Yeah.
Sorry, we do have a caller, and I was just wanting to bring them on the line. Hello, 4447. You're on with Healing X Outreach.
Hi there. This is Brian calling. I just wondered who's host today. I'm sorry, I didn't.
Oh, yeah, my name's Jeremy Shepard. Yeah, my name's Jeremy Shepard, and I'm the host for today. How are you, Brian?
Good. And your two guests are brother
Marcus. And
Brother Marcus and Oso.
So is it so real?
So real. Okay, I just want. Are both
Yes.
of you gentlemen, the guests, are both of you gentlemen black?
Yes.
You're
Yes.
Now I have three quick questions. Now, do you ever find that there are any white people who will ever join any of these movements and support it?
You know what? I do know of one group. There's a group that Marcus and I have just totally thrashed. You can kind of check it out on my YouTube channel. And the debate is called, Does Jesus Fit the Prophecies? And these guys are called the Torah Knights. And on the Torah Knights, there is a white gentleman, and he's basically a part of it. But yet, everybody else is there is black, and they speak against the white Edomites and things, and yet the black gentleman that's the leader of it just happens to live in Japan with a Japanese wife, but yet he tries to historically and linguistically justify that his wife is an Israelite and that the Japanese language is Hebrew and its origin and all this other stuff, and samurai means this, and it's insane. But yeah, there are some people who are in there, and that yet they're still called white this, white that, but yet they're still in there, and they're the ones that are respected, but yet the other white people that are not part of the group, they're disrespected. So it's really weird. I don't know how it works. I've seen a few of their YouTube videos, and it just looks really, really weird. But yeah, it is true. There's, and as a matter of fact, they were called Black Hebrew Israelites in the 1960s. Then they were called Hebrew Israelites recently, and now I even hear that the IUIC is just calling themselves Israelites. Now, I've always had a theory that, one day that there is going to be white Hebrew Israelites and all this and that, because they keep on making themselves less black. And I don't know why, but that's just the way it's going.
Yeah, I haven't had too much exposure, but there was one video where there were some Jehovah's Witnesses calling on some black Israelites, and they had a bit of a discussion, and so I did make a comment. But anyway, my other question is, how is Dr. King viewed? Like Dr. Martin Luther King, what's the view within these black Israelites? Because it's obviously a very racist movement, and I understand there's a lot of, like, some of these people are descendants of slaves, and there's a lot of extreme bad feeling towards white people, and which believe me, us, we white people, we understand all of that, and of course. But anyway, the point is, how do they view Dr. King? Because Dr. King was very, obviously a black man, and so very, very forgiving towards the white races. So how do these people view Dr. King specifically?
Yeah, but Brother Marcus, did you want to take that one?
Yeah, as far as Dr. Martin Luther King, they view him as a traitor to the nation. They believe that he was secretly paid by the government to do what he did during the Civil Rights Movement.
Yeah, that's kind of what I thought. How could he be viewed in any positive light by them? So, okay, gentlemen, the story's fascinating, very interesting, and The other one quick thing, I have a question. When I was a little boy in the 60s, 50s and 60s, occasionally I remember seeing the odd afternoon movie would come on, and it was all black people with a black Jesus and everything. And I remember being a bit confused because, of course, I had the little picture of the white Jesus and asking my mother about it. And she said, well, these are some, we used to use the term Negro back in those days, in the 50s and 60s. Well, these are Negro people who, they love Jesus too, and they just feel that he must have been a little bit more like them, and they and they would have there was Hebrew spirit, there were black spiritual songs on some of these movies and so on. And I'm wondering if that was kind of part of the embryo of some of the stuff that we see today.
Yes, I would say yes, it is. Because like I said earlier, this movement, again, was a response or retaliation to the social, political situation African Americans were in. So during the time, of the 60s and even before the 60s, we know about the condition African Americans were in. There was a lot of discrimination, this, that, and the third. And so what many blacks, during that time felt was the right thing to do was to kind of like, blackwash everything, sort of like how they felt like everything was whitewashed. Now there needs to be a blackwashing to where instead of praying to, a Caucasian image of Jesus Christ, we would pray to a African American, African American version of Jesus Christ. And so this was like a response or like a retaliation to their situation. So that's basically, I would say that definitely played a part into it. Those type of shows are always brought up a lot by IUIC. They'll say, see, even they knew the truth. They'll even show like certain old TV shows. I forgot the name of the show, but they would also use that. They would take the clips from that show of you would have like the black family with the black Jesus on the wall, and they'll say, see, Hollywood knows the truth. They know that Jesus Christ was black. So they'll use that as like some type of, ammunition to reinforce their doctrine.
Right. I even remember seeing one of those clips. I believe it was it was the Jeffersons. I don't remember if that's the actual name of the program or not.
That's the name of the show. Right.
So where the young boy was having a conversation with his mom about which Jesus should be on the wall, the black Jesus or the white Jesus.
Yeah, that's exactly the clip that they used. They used that exact clip right there.
Right. So I just wanted to say the program, as far as broadcasting on Blog Talk, has officially ended. However, the rest of the program will be available for download on iTunes or your favorite podcatcher. So even though we're continuing to talk after the broadcast time, that will still be available. And so I just wanted to ask both of you gentlemen, do you have anything that you'd like to say as we're wrapping up here?
I would just say, for the people listening out there, to make sure they're continuously reading and studying, and, kind of inform. It'll be best to kind of inform maybe your family or your friends about, the dangers of these, the different dangers of these cults out here, because you might be surprised. It could be your family member or a friend who gets caught up in these types of things. So you have to raise more public awareness of this stuff, and try our best to prevent these types of things from happening. Because again, these types of movements, they will destroy families. I mean, we haven't really even gotten to the details of how they do that, but they will destroy a family. They will destroy friendships, and destroy lives. So I would just say, for those listeners out there, if you're a Christian, you have to make sure you're armed, make sure you're studied up, and you you know what you're following, and be aware of the heretical doctrines out there, how it can beguile, your family members, your friends, and even you possibly.
Right.
Yeah, and you know what? Not only that, but listen, I say this all the time. A lot of this stuff, a lot of these cults, a lot of these organizations, whatever is going on, it wouldn't even get to the growth potential that it would get to if people just did their history. If people just looked at just simple historical stuff, what Christianity has always believed versus someone who doesn't, who doesn't believe Christianity has always believed. We believe in the Trinity, others don't. We believe Jesus is God, they don't. We believe the Holy Spirit is a person, they don't. We believe that the church is the emphasis of the body of Christ, they don't. They believe that Israel is. We believe our identity is in the Lord. They believe that their identity is in Israel. It goes on and on and on, And so another thing I would say is Brother Marcus is right. Hear us and hear us well. They will divide up and split you up from your families. When anyone ends up leaving a church or they just go to another denomination or whatever, most of the time, you don't hear from the person again, and that's it. And, maybe you might see them around and, hey, what church you go to now? Well, the Lord led me here. That's usually what happens. Not in the cult. You know what happens? When you leave that cult, you make sure that you don't say anything. There was a man who had recently left, and he is talking to me now. He left, quote, unquote, 2 Sabbaths ago from the IUIC, and he says that if everyone wasn't scared, that they would actually voice out against the IUIC, and the IUIC would lose their legs of a ministry. But everyone's scared to voice out and speak out. You know why? Because they don't want to be slandered. They don't want their names to be tarnished. They collect their IDs. They collect all these people's stuff before they end up joining. And so they have all this information that they can say about them if they decide to try to expose some of the stuff. Why? Because it's a business. And any time that you have bad business, it's because you have a bad name. So they have a business to protect, not a truth to push. The truth, that's just the code part. That's the coding. This is really just about business. So, like I said, you don't see stuff like that when people just, leave a church and go to another or something. You don't see that. But for a cult, you do. For the Mormons, Jehovah's Witnesses, the shunning, all this stuff. So, yeah, just look at the plain patterns. Yes, they will end up splitting up your family. You can reference a show that was on my YouTube channel with Cherry Love. I ended up interviewing her. She gave me a 2-hour testimony about how her cousin had finally gotten away from that stuff after she gave 7 years of her life to it. And that is gut-wrenching to listen to. So please, do your research before you jump into something that looks so nice and pristine.
Absolutely. Well, gentlemen, thank you so much for coming on to the program today. I want to also give a special thanks to Vocab Malone, a pastor out in Arizona. He was the one who actually put me into contact with both of you. Would not have been able to do the show without it, and I want to give a special thanks to him. Thank both of you for coming on today. It was very enlightening, and I hope that in the future we can actually do another program and get into some more of these topics that we only got time today to go over. But hopefully you would be willing to discuss these together.
Most definitely. Thank you for having us. Thank you. It's been a pleasure and a blessing.
Right, absolutely,
right.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Well, to all of our guests out there, thank you for calling in and listening. Please be in prayer for those who are stuck in cults, and we ask that you have a good day. Take care.